Welcome to the Motogp Xtra podcast.
Round 11 of the Motogp mad season that continues is off to Red Bull Ring for one of the more interesting racetracks on the calendar. Not. It is very dull, very boring in some ways, but also adds good racing, adds a bit of everything. It's also in the hills. It's a beautiful location. And if you are going to go to a race, it's one of the better ones because of the facilities. Now, before we get into the actual weekend, we have a few pre-weekend bits. We usually cover them at the start. We actually have a lot this week. Different tyres in the GP class. I call them the bowling ball spec. They're preheated tyres. They come with a coating. Basically the aim of the game is so that they heat up differently and they don't shred over the long distance of the race. It is positive and negative for some teams. If you think of everyone who's been struggling in 2024 compared to last year, for example, Bezecchi, he's a straightaway that comes to mind. Both KTMs, factory KTMs, benefit a lot from having these preheated tyres. So Rhys, come into this weekend, I hadn't heard much about it, but when we got to the early days of the weekend on Friday, it was a lot of the talk of the paddock that this could change both sprint racing and the main race.
Yeah, I mean, it's typical that the circuit, they bring a different tyre. I mean, like you always say, that they always call it the bowling ball spec. I don't know if it really was like that this time, but it seems that they've brought a heat-treated tyre, and like you said, it seems to have an effect on the grip quite a bit. Usually, you know, they bring a different spec. I remember, I think it was 2020 when they changed the rear tyre. They brought the old 2019 tyre back for this round because the 2021 just couldn't sort of cut it. And Dovi, who had been struggling with the new tyre all season, wins his only race of the season there. So it kind of does show that this does make a bit of a difference. You get it at other tracks like Thailand and things like that as well when it's quite hot and a lot of acceleration zones, which again, if you think of the two track characteristics, I mean, they don't look the same if you look at the track map, but there's a lot of sort of hairpins or onto long straights and stuff, both those circuits, so you see why they bring this different spec of tyre. But like you said, yeah, some of the guys that have been struggling and some of the guys that just haven't been a fan, like even Marc Marquez wasn't really a fan of the new tyre so far this year, definitely found this tyre to be a bit better, but some people like the Aprilias, like Vinales and Aleix, actually found it to be quite a bit worse.
Yeah, so it's, as always, there's winners and losers when there's any changes. But also, we did have 3 wildcards. So we had a wildcard for Aprilia, KTM and Honda, the usual 3 boys out. It was interesting to see Paul Espargaro. The other 2, probably gathering data, really. I didn't see much from Lorenzo Salvatore or Stefan Bradl. But to be fair to Paul Espargaro, surprised me. I know he's probably going around that track a million miles an hour every day, so he should be up to speed in it. But at the same time, he's been out of the class. He's also been doing a commentary. You don't really have that race sharpness that he did, and in fairness, I think he did a very good job. Rhys, what did you make of Espargaro, especially this weekend over the other 2 wildcard?
Yeah, I mean, if you compare it to the other wildcards, obviously blew him out of the water, but like you said, obviously he's done a lot of running here. It seems to kind of be the thing with the KTM wildcards, they tend to do a test pretty soon before the race. That's why you obviously see like Pedrosa whenever he comes in and wildcards do pretty well. Back in the day, if you've been watching MotoGP for a while, you remember Kallio when he used to come and do the wildcards. He used to basically walk the floor with the factory riders when he turned up because, well, for one, they had massive strides to make, so the bike was probably a decent bit better, but he was a handy little rider and he'd usually done a lot of tests coming into the weekend, so he was right on form. But yeah, it's a good weekend for Paul. I mean, I think you make a good point there by saying the race sharpness, obviously he's going to lose that, and I think that was quite apparent. That's where he was struggling. His actual pace was pretty good, and we do know Paul is a bit of a screen biter, so you know he's going to be able to do I think he's probably a bit better maybe at the time attack than Pedrosa, for example, when he comes and does his wildcards, because he did really well on the time attack. But yeah, I think over the race distance he did struggle a little bit, but yeah, he certainly did a lot better. And if you talk about the other 2 wildcards, I think I saw Bradl crash at one point, and I think I saw Salvadore's bike smoking at one point, and that's the only 2 times I saw them all weekend. So yeah, I think definitely a better weekend for Paul than the other 2.
And now, just before we get into the weekend, we do have to just round up on some transfer news. Now, the big one for me, Ayogura to Trackhouse. Now, a lot of people, including us, had a feeling maybe Joe Roberts from Moto2, the Californian kid, might get that move, considering the team is owned by Justin Marks, the American. Now, everyone keeps calling this team the American team, the American team. It's run by Spanish. It's owned by an American. So the reasoning why they probably didn't go all out and try to get Joe, which they could have got if they wanted, is kind of, it's in reading between the lines. The owner and the kind of picture front of the team is an American, and that's why everyone keeps calling it the American team, as if it's run from America and it's all American engineers. It's still a kind of Spanish/Italian run team. So it wasn't as much a surprise. It was a surprise Iogora went there. Rhys, what did you make of Iogora? Eventually, he was going to get a GP contract. I didn't think it was winning Aprilia though.
No, I didn't think that's all. I mean, he's done a really, really shrewd move there because, of course, he had that season in Moto3, see where he fought with Reynolds for the championship and just lost out. Came up to Moto2 and it's been pretty amazing in Moto2 since the start. Obviously, we'll have the incident that shall not be named back at Sepang, which obviously cost him the 22 title. Last year had the injury, so struggled a bit, but this year has been back on form. Obviously, the big thing this year was he actually left the Honda Team Asia fold, which is like the first I've ever seen anyone do that. Like, actually leave it sort of willingly rather than just being pushed out because they've not been good enough and maybe they found a ride somewhere else or whatever. But he left, obviously, to MT helmets. I think it sounds like he'd been offered the Idemitsu seat in MotoGP a couple of times. He kind of said no to it. Don't really blame him, because why would you want to jump on that Honda at the moment? Just ride around the back. You're better off fighting for wins in Moto2 and not getting injured constantly, although probably not the best thing to say considering what happened to him this weekend. But yeah, I didn't expect to see him on an Aprilia, but it's a really good move for him. He's done a fantastic job to break out of that, get onto a decent bike. And to be fair, I can't really blame them for making that decision, because if you look at it on paper, purely who would you pick? You would pick Iogora every time over Joe Roberts. So it's unfortunate for Joe, and obviously, like you say, the whole American side of it. But again, it's not really that American, the team. The owner is American, and obviously they've got all the American sort of some sponsors on there and stuff. But a lot of it, a lot of the sponsors, I guess, that are actually on the bike are Aprilia sponsors more than, actually Trackhouse themselves. Obviously, I know Trackhouse splash their own name up the sides. That's obviously the main one you see. But again, that's just the owner, really, Justin Marks, and obviously the actual guy running the team effectively is Davide Brivio. So, like you say, it's a sort of Italian, Spanish-run team kind of thing. Obviously, because a lot of effectively, it's the old Mar VDS team, I think, from MotoGP when they sort of came up and had like Morbidelli and Luti and that. I think effectively it goes all the way back to that. And the Petronas Yamaha team, it's all still that team effectively. So yeah, it's not like just some American team. It's not like when to make the F1 comparison that people always love, like when Haas came into Formula One, where they actually, all sort of came on their own and was, kind of American. I mean, maybe that's still not even the best example because, they sort of buy chassis and stuff for other people, but, it's not a new American team on the grid. It's an American guy bought an existing team, effectively. So, yeah, and I guess that's why it didn't quite have the sway. Although I feel like Joe maybe would have been a bit better in the video that they put out. It looked a bit awkward. I don't know what you thought about that one when like sort of Agora just kind of sat there as this guy's like, welcome to the house. I think it would have worked a bit better if it was maybe an American for that video, but yeah, that's probably about as far as it goes, maybe some of the social media side.
Yeah, I think a lot of the marketing is meant to make it look like it's the stripes and the stars and it's America and all that, but if you're in the know and you kind of know the paddock, it's not, I don't say front because that's wrong, but it's not an American team by any kind of sparkly imagination. But to finish up, we have a couple of transfers that are confirmed and then one that is almost confirmed. So Digi, 2 years with the factory team bike supported in VR46, and Frankie Morbidelli is also going to be joining for 2025. Rhys, we kind of already knew about this, so I kind of glanced across quickly, but the one thing that's actually a bit of a turnaround is Miller is very, very much set for Pramac. A bit of Dorna getting involved with the Australian passport kind of thing, but probably the last podcast we probably mentioned that he was no phone calls from any world level teams, and he was looking at probably America or going back to Aussie Superbikes. So is it a good move for Pramac? I'm not going to say Miller because him keeping himself in the GP obviously is good for him, but is it a good move for Pramac and for Yamaha?
Yeah, well, it sounds like, obviously, the Pramac, it very much sounds like it's going to be Oliveira and Miller of that team. That's basically all the strong rumours. And it sounds like, basically, because the Yamaha is in such a mess, there's no point putting two rookies on there because they're not going to help with development. Whereas if you put on two experienced riders, they can help bring on the bike. Sounds like, as well, I think we'll probably talk about this a little bit when we go to Moto2, but they're kind of changing the Master Camp Yamaha team a little bit in the Moto2 class, be like the Pramac sort of Yamaha sort of junior team, so that's when they'll probably bring the young riders through, and I think Lopez and Arbolino are potentially earmarked for those seats. So I think maybe that's the plan. So for the next couple of years, try and bring in some experienced riders like Miller. As much as Miller, he loves to chew a tyre, he loves to chuck it up the road. He's a good development rider, clearly, because he did some good work at Ducati, he's done some good work at KTM. I'm pretty sure they gave him new parts at Ducati even after he confirmed he was leaving. That's how good of a development rider he kind of is, because they trust that much his feedback, even because you never do that. You never give new parts to someone that's leaving the factory. So Yeah, I think it's probably not a bad move. I mean, it's not going to help them with the tyre wear over race distance, but they've already got Fabio and Rins for that, and Oliveira might help with the wet development. So there you go. And Miller's pretty handy in the wet, so maybe the Yamaha will finally not be rubbish in the wet after those guys have been on it. But the BR46 stuff as well, yeah, like no surprise there because we'd already been told that's what's happening. So yeah, there was no shock to that announcement because it had already accidentally been announced, and it was also pretty obvious. Although the did you get in the factory bike part was obviously interesting, little addition and well deserved.
So Moto3 at Spielberg, the Rebel Ring, is always a very interesting one. It's very heavily slipstream city, and this race, of course, was no difference. Now, before we get into it, we did have a few penalties. Some of the top guys. So we saw Alonso get a penalty, which was kind of the big talking point coming into this race. There was a load of other riders get it too, but I think we'd spend most podcasts going through listing off every rider if we had to say who has a penalty in Moto3. But the main one was Alonso. He had a long lap, and, well, spoiler alert, he wins the race from it. But did we really think a long lap? I have it in the notes here. Does a long lap work? Because we've seen people win from pit lane. We saw people win from double long lap penalties. Single long laps, are they enough? That's the first question I'm going to ask, and then we'll kind of get on to just penalties in general. I think, again, we kind of talk about it every week, so we probably won't spend too long on it because it'll probably be a lot of repeating ourselves. But do we need to look maybe at a different system for the penalty system other than a long lap?
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit of a different situation, wasn't it, this one? Because generally, when you see these penalties get given out, it's because they've balked somebody. Like, they've actually got in someone's way, whereas, actually, on this occasion, they didn't get in anybody's way, but it was just the fact that what they were doing was dangerous. And I quite like the fact that they didn't necessarily actually have to affect anybody to get the penalty, because I think Colin Vire was a couple of corners back, and he was the rider that was approaching, but didn't get affected at all by them. I mean, like, they were all just cruising on like a blind curve, which is ridiculously dangerous. So it's good to see they're actually sort of kind of going ahead of the incident and actually penalising, because a lot of the time they just kind of wait for something to happen and they're like, oh, you shouldn't have done that. But it's good to see that. And I think the penalties differ, don't they? So I think it's supposed to be like tiered. Like, I think like first offence it's a long lap, second offence it's like a double long lap, and then I think after like so many you get a pit lane start. So I think that's why Alonso in particular only got single, because it's pretty unlike him to do that kind of thing, in fairness. So, you know, and when you see like Marc Marquez and people like doing it at MotoGP every weekend, of course these guys are going to do it, because they're like looking up and they're saying, wow, you know, these guys are doing it, I'm going to do it. So you can understand it in a way. But in terms of the actual penalty, does the long lap work? It's difficult because there's not much, unless you're really draconian with it, where on like first offence you're instantly like back a like sort of pit lane or whatever. Like, there's not really much else you can kind of give out, unless it's maybe like a grid position penalty, which would be even more pointless because you're literally losing like no time in Moto3 effective at that point, because they're all so close together. And I mean, the long lap works more in the other categories. I think in Moto3 it seems to be less, because I guess because the packs are so big, you can take the long lap penalty from the lead and still rejoin the lead group, and that's almost like still being there, because you've got the slipstream pulling you along, and you don't really have to make up the time. You just pass people occasionally, like, you know, you pass a couple every lap, and you're all of a sudden back on the back. Whereas you get Moto2, for example, you get a long lap or a double long lap, you're going right, you know, you're losing loads of places, you're losing loads of time, and there's big gaps you've got to build back. And it's the same with MotoGP. We've seen people's races be ruined by having long lap penalties. I mean, Morbidelli had a double long lap, didn't he, in Silverstone after what he did in the sprint. Didn't see him all race. I mean, you probably wouldn't have seen him anyway, but even more so, he was like battling with like Fabio Quartararo for a lot of the race and stuff like that. So I think it's difficult, because in Moto3 it just seems like the long lap isn't as effective. And I suppose it makes sense because the bikes are slower as well. So when you're going around a slightly longer loop, I guess you're not, I suppose one way to look at it is if you lose 3 seconds on like a 1 minute 20 lap, that's a lot. But if you're losing 3 seconds on a 1 minute 30 lap, it's not as much. So the fact the bikes are slower, because the lap time loss is going to be similar in each class, but the actual, obviously, in ratio to the actual lap time, it's interesting. So yeah, it's an interesting point. Maybe we do need to just be harsher with them. I mean, especially, I am one for, like, if it's your first offence, you don't want to be, you know, too harsh, because you could have been a mistake, and, you know, people, it's also not fair when people are at the moment getting away with doing it like 5 times and basically getting the same penalty. So it would be unfair to give someone like a pit lane on the first offence. But yeah, I feel like they do need to just come down a bit harder and make it ruin your race, because yeah, it's dangerous, and we see it every weekend, and we're going to continue to see it at the moment, because yeah, like you said, David Alonso still won with the long lap penalty. So for someone like him, it's worth it. It's worth it if he can maybe if he can get away with it, then it's worth taking the risk. If it doesn't affect him anyway. So yeah, but I suppose he's probably not one that really needs it as much as a lot of these other guys that are on their like 5th offence or whatever.
Yeah, so I agree to the most point. I disagree with the dog barking in the background. I think he was banging out the ring. His points were not valid today. Apologies if you could hear the dog barking ever so slightly in the background, but he's getting involved in anyway. The penalty system. I'm interested to see what Crayford does when he comes in, because I think he'll come in. He'll want his own input, and he'll want to put his own swing on the class in all three, and including the penalties. I think he'll want to. Not going to rewrite the rule book, but he'll definitely want to put his stamp and his ideology on it. So I'm hoping that next year we see stricter penalties again. We did touch this on last week, 2 weeks podcast, last round's podcast ago. And just for the outset, we just need clear, concise penalties. If we go away from the long laps and go back to time penalties, it gets messy in, because inconsistencies creep in. Like, remember, there's people getting penalties of like, oh, he went off the track there, he gained 0.4, we give him a half a second penalty, and kind of these kind of stupid
Austria,
things where
you're like point like 3,
yeah, exactly,
5,
and it's
like
just
Pedrosa was like reading on his pit board, like couldn't figure out what was going on.
Yeah, it just gets messy. So at least with the long lap, like for example in the sprint when Jorge Martin knew and Pecco knew that he was going to get a long lap, he knew that's his penalty. He knows exactly how it works. He knows, at least they all are in the know. Whether it's strict or not, I'd probably like to get the viewers' input really and see what other people think about it. But I think at the moment it's just not strict enough. I think it just needs to be a bit more, turn the screw a bit more. Either, obviously, each racetrack we go to, you can't really go redevelop the long lap. I don't think it's an issue with the long lap, but I just think that they need to be slightly. The fact people are still winning the races with getting penalties is just not right for me. If you get a penalty for doing something wrong, like Alonso did on Saturday, it should almost prevent you from winning the race, like, end of. Whereas we see a lot of people win races. I know it's more in Moto 3, because if you look at what Garcia in Moto 2, we'll get him later, but he got a penalty, long lap penalty for track limits, dropped back, and then he couldn't recover, and that was his race done, and it worked perfectly, and I really liked the way it worked, because it could see clear, concise, it did what it did, and it affected him for making the mistake of going off track 5 times, and it worked there. I just feel in Moto 3 is just a bit of a different ball game, and it just ends up being a bit of a overall a weird one to call it. And again, we've seen people win from pit lane. It goes back to, do the bikes need to be changed? Do they need to be harder to ride? So there's a whole party of podcast alone in Moto 3 alone, but we are going to move on to a mistake from Ivan Artola. So we didn't really see it live at the time. We just saw that P1 was missing when we went to go 5 red lights. He had stalled on the way to the grid, like rolling up to the grid. They pushed him into the pits. The live coverage didn't do a good job of catching it, because I think it was like nearly lap 2 before we saw the cutback to him being put in. He's a second in the championship. He was the closest rival to Alonso coming into this race. To me, this is kind of nearly gift wrap the title in a way. I know we have a long way left, but Alonso has such a big gap. Was Artola ever going to really claw the points back? Me personally, I think he has these races every maybe 5-6 rounds where he's really strong, gets a good result, but he doesn't back it up week after week after week and round after round. So for me, it's a big mistake for him today, and it's a big points loss, but I don't think it really affects the championship, because I don't think he was ever really up against Alonso in a fair fight. Again, I'd like to get your opinion on and see what you think, but for me, Alonso's title to lose. I don't think Artola, even with this mistake, was making any difference to it.
Yeah, I mean, Artola does a good purple patch, doesn't he, to be fair? It does seem to be like kind of a thing for him. He just turns up and is really good for a certain few rounds, but the thing is, like, he was clawing points back, but like Alonso was still finishing like second behind him, so he wasn't regaining many back, and Alonso had a pretty big lead. I don't know what the lead is. Is it getting on for 2 race wins now? Like, it's a big lead, isn't it? So yeah, it's one of those things where they're never really, like, it's possible they could catch him, because obviously anything can happen. You could easily get knocked off in like Moto 3 or whatever, and you know, if you then win the race, that's 25 points obviously back in your favour. But he just plays himself so well.
Almost 3 race wins. I just looked at it there. Sorry, it's 72 points, 71 points, 71.
They're never cashing him, are they? They're not cashing that up.
Yeah,
unless he literally has
bar injury or huge mechanical issues. That's done.
But he's just been by far the best rider all year. So I guess like the pundits have to make a sort of story out of it. They have to kind of act like it. But it's a bit like Arbolino last year. Like there was no way he was ever beating Acosta. Like it just wasn't going to happen. Like, I know obviously he took a bit of a fight to him, and obviously Acosta had to come back. But once Acosta sort of started to build out a buffer, it was never catching it back up. But they still tried to sort of, act like it was going to happen. Whereas, yeah, it's just not going to happen there because Alonso just can basically win at will. And the races that he doesn't win, he finishes pretty well. I think the only thing he's really done badly all year was when he crashed at Jerez, and he crashed out the lead. So it wasn't like he was struggling all weekend and he said rubbish. So yeah, it was always going to be an uphill task, and yeah, this makes it even harder because it did seem like Ortola and probably Vea were like the best two really to go for it. Holgado's just kind of hung in there because his start to the season was pretty good, as it was last year really. He doesn't seem to have it compared to, although he finished third today. Obviously, he was the top of the other guys, I guess. So Munoz was kind of in the middle of them, but he's not really in the championship, and he was actually higher up in the standings. So I remember seeing that than I expected, but. Yeah, it was always going to be an uphill task. It was never really going to happen, but he did a good recovery. He did as much as he could in terms of clawing the points back, but you can't give David Alonso even more points. You got to beat him every race if you're going to claw that lead back.
And moving on now to the actual race itself, because we've talked a lot about the kind of outcome and the proceedings. We haven't talked much about the race itself. It was your typical kind of Moto3. Again, most weeks it's your typical Moto3, but at Spielberg. Very heavily slipstream kind of race. We had a group of about 8. We had a couple of Hondas in there. We again got a prop. I was thinking halfway through the race, the two Leopard Hondas, thereabouts doing again quite good considering this is KTM's home track. The KTM has made such a jump this year, even though the Honda's supposedly on its way, but we're kind of the jury's out on that one at the moment.
Well, the Honda looks the same as it did last year. The KTM doesn't. That tells you everything you need to know.
KTM looks like it's made 3 years in one off season, whereas the Honda still looks like the one that has been around since like 2017. So yeah, that kind of again, if you read between the lines, you see a lot of motorsport and press releases and what people are saying for certain teams doesn't always hold water. But it was just your again back to it. It was your typical race. We had a group of about 8 people. We had people who went to the start. The only difference was tyre wear did play a big effect. We had Joel Kelso who had a good race up to about half point and then just struggled with Munoz again he was actually kind of defending his teammate quite well. He was trying to play the team game of have them both go away together. Obviously Alonso takes his penalties, falls in and around P5, just kind of slides in, just kind of goes like the invisible man for a few 5, 6, 7 laps and kind of just takes off the laps and gets himself where he needs to be. And again, Holgado's there, but the question mark of Holgado again to this week for some reason. It looks like Colin Vare just missing that last 1% because there was one point of the race he was towards the back of the group and he looked like he was just doing good enough to stay there. Then he makes a bit of a resurgence, comes forward and it looked like he's saving, and then at the end it just looked like he didn't have enough and ended up finishing P5. But Rhys, was there ever going to be any other choice of a race than just one this consistent slipstream and then we'll get down to 3 laps to go and gloves come off kind of job?
Yeah, well, half the track's flat for the Moto3 bikes, so you're always going to have a bit of a slipstream affair. Even through some of the fast corners, they're like flat through them, so it's always going to scope it up. I mean, to be fair, it's spread out a little bit on the opening couple of laps. Kelso put the hammer down, and obviously he pulled away a little bit, and he was pulling away with Munoz and Holgado, but then as obviously Alonso took his penalty and sort of came back through, he kind of brought a couple with him, brought Piqueras with him, didn't he? And then Adrian Fernandez was sort of closing up, and I think then the pace perhaps dropped a little at the front because obviously they couldn't keep going for the tyres, and it scoped back up into that sort of lead pack. But yeah, it was I guess your general race, but perhaps wasn't quite as aggressive, and I don't think they had to look after the tyres quite as much as they have in other races, which is a surprise because you would think this being a tyre wear circuit really that you would, but actually it seemed like they hung in there pretty well. Moto3, so they did have to do a bit of management, but I've definitely seen, you can kind of tell by how big the pack is. The pack is big, they're definitely managing more, but I think also this circuit, it's so basic, it usually brings you together, but I think it's so easy to make a mistake trying to grab that little extra. It does perhaps scope out the pack a little bit, and when you have some of the top guys then sort of just bolting away at the beginning, it makes it fairly difficult. But yeah, Joe Kelso obviously led early on. I think he then kind of used his tyre up and got beaten up. I've seen that one a few times over the years. Last year, I think, was Catalunya, or was it this year Catalunya that happened to him? He's done a few times. He was looking pretty good this weekend, but the results, again, seems to be pretty similar. He just can't quite click that one together. Colin, yeah, like you said, was obviously struggling a little bit. He was on pole here last year, but he didn't quite seem to have it all weekend. I mean, he did the laps on his own as always. He got on the front row, but I think just being a bit of a bigger lad, it's just a bit of a disadvantage here because, again, it's so straight line speed dependent. It's a bit like Mugello, I guess. The start finish straight when you lose to time, it's certainly a big disadvantage for him compared to some of the smaller riders, especially like you got your Munoz and stuff's quite small. So yeah, it is difficult for Colin, and yeah, I mean he didn't quite have it, but still was there or thereabouts. And again, just another round where he's showing that he's there or thereabouts. And of course, he's been announced he's going up to Moto2 next year, so well deserved promotion for him.
Yeah, just as you're thinking, I completely forgot that we had to mention that he's moving up to Moto2.
So is Ortola as well.
He is Ortola's taking Dixon's seat, am I right in saying that, or one of those?
No,
seats?
Ortola's taking. We're staying with the same team. He's just moved to Moto2, so he's taking Agora's seat.
Oh, he's taking Agora's seat. So yeah, there's again we could probably talk about now. There's talks that Dixon is on the move to Mark VDS, and it looks like that they're kind of making room for Alonso prematurely, if that makes sense. So kind of getting him, Dixon being one of the top guys in Moto2. They're kind of looking like they're making room for when Alonso wants to come up. Again, we'll touch more about Dixon and stuff and that, but again, it looks like already Alonso is kind of, his future is getting planned out in front of him because, again, we don't want to say the championship's over in Moto3, but for the most part,
it's 70 points, it's over.
Without result, yeah, exactly.
Unless you put him on like a Moto4 or something, like, it's not.
Yeah, like we're going to get to
a little over
second Mazzano, he's going to have 9. Yeah, exactly. Really struggle then. We're going to get to the second Mazzano, he's going to be like 98 points up front. We're going to still try to stay like, but he might be great in the rain in
remember Bagnaia, he won about 92 points on Quartararo, you know.
Yeah, exactly. So we still need to play the devil advocate a small bit, but that championship is more than closed at this point. Ortola, it was a great recovery ride. Still a bit of a unfortunate because it was his fault, but again, worth just kind of pointing out on his day, he is moving up like we said, but on his day he's a very good Moto3 rider. It just seems inconsistent, which is worrying because usually the top guys in Moto3 are consistent and then they go up to Moto2 and become inconsistent and find their form. If he's inconsistent in Moto3, I worry what he'll be like in Moto2 on a bigger bike, on a definitely more awkward class. But again, today he made a mistake, good recovery, but he has a mistake in him as well, like a lot of riders do, but it's just, there's something with Ortola, just that 1% of something he needs is missing, and I'm hoping between the end of this season and maybe the off season, find if it goes to Moto2, because I worry he could turn into another Ivan Guevara, and he just ends up kind of doing nothing in that class, because he's a very, very talented rider, but you just want to see him maybe just, very young of course, but I think he just needs off the rough edges at the moment. I don't know if you agree or not, but at the moment I think he just needs to sort out the consistency, because that's no question of his speed, it's consistency. Race management it seems to be fairly good as well. It's just consistently being at the front really for me.
He's definitely been better at it this year. It was definitely a lot worse last year. He basically won 2 races and then was nowhere for the rest of the year. He's been there or thereabouts most rounds. He's been missing a couple of times, but you do get that sometimes in Moto3. I wouldn't hold him stalling on the grid too much against him, because everybody's done it at some point. I mean, even Marc Marquez has done it a few times back in the day, so look where he's look what happened to him as his career went on. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. It is a bit of a bottle, I guess, but I mean, the bike stall doesn't necessarily mean it was his fault that happened. It could have been some sort of electrical problem that caused it, or whatever, or a clutch issue or something. I mean, I'm guessing it probably was his fault, but you don't know for sure, so yeah, I'm not going to be too harsh on the guy for that, because he had a good race after that, recovered. I mean, it's pretty difficult to recover from the pit lane start here. I mean, if you remember, Zarco had it back after the big incident in 2020. I mean, he could barely catch anybody up, and he was on a pretty decent bike that year, and he was pretty quick. So I think this is probably one of the harsher ones to have the pit lane start, because you have to go all the way around sort of turn 1 and then up the straight a little bit, and that's when when the pit limiter sort of disengages. So yeah, so it's quite a tough one, but he did a good job, and within the first few laps he'd already passed a lot of riders, but just once he sort of got to the head of the chasing pack, like past Suzuki and that, he couldn't go any further because they were just too far in front. So it was a good recovery from him, and yeah, we'll have to see how he gets on in Moto2 next year. I think he will be a good fit, because it really seems on the MT Helmet seems one of the best teams in the paddock, and they've only just turned up in the last couple of years, so quite phenomenal from those guys, to be fair, because they're winning in everything. I mean, they're on pole Moto3, they won in Moto-E, they were on, well, I guess their Moto2 wasn't that great this weekend, but overall it's been pretty decent. So yeah, it's certainly going to be a good team to go up to.
So for Moto 2, we were having another beautiful weekend for Oyagora until practice on Saturday, where he made his first big mistake of the year. Small high side coming out of the first chicane in the lap, and unfortunately broke his hand, and that was him out after signing with Aprilia for 2025 with the Trackhouse team that we mentioned earlier. It was really looking like Oyagora's weekend to throw away, and unfortunately his first mistake, and it wasn't a huge crash, it was an unfortunate one. He did land quite hard and unfortunately was declared unfit for the race. Rhys probably going from the highest high to the lowest low, because I still think he's probably favoured for a championship, especially with his team at misfiring this weekend. For me, Aldeguer must have been in Portugal or some other racetrack, because I didn't see him all weekend. And really, I think he could have nearly taken the lead of the championship this weekend, because it was probably nailed on he was going to win. But of course, in bike racing, nothing is nailed on, as we did see with his crash.
Yeah, he's had an odd couple of weeks, has Agora. Obviously, pole position in Silverstone. We were pretty certain he was going to win from that position. Just went back to 14th. Don't know what happened to him. Probably some sort of tyre issue or something. I'm not exactly sure what happened. Obviously, then it gets announced between the rounds that he's got this seat at Trackhouse, which obviously was heavily rumoured going into Silverstone as well. So he's announced that. So yeah, he's on top of the world. He comes to a track where he's always been phenomenal at Austria. Every year that he's done in Moto2, he's been right up there. He's won here in the past, and again, he looked like he's going to continue that one. He was straight out of the blocks really fast. And yeah, small mistake. I can't believe it's his first crash of the season. I didn't realise he hadn't crashed at all, which is crazy. And then yeah, just really unfortunate, because I think the bike just hits his hand as it comes back down. I think that's probably what's done the damage. If you look at the replay, it looks like his hand does get clipped on the bike, and yeah, it's declared him unfit for this weekend. Hopefully he'll be back for Aragon, but like you say, he would have been in a really good position to capitalise here, because Garcia struggled so much, but at the same time, he's also been let off. He's been let off quite lightly, because you think over the last 2 race weekends he's scored 2 points and he's still only 30 off the championship lead. That's pretty good going. So yeah, I mean, I think, because I was thinking, wow, this could be Oyagora's championship over when I saw that, because I was thinking he must already be quite far behind. He's going to get another probably 16, 20 points behind, because Garcia's been delivering every weekend. But did seem like this weekend was maybe the first where the Bosco was really struggling, aside from really Lopez, I guess, was looking good. I guess we don't know how well Agora actually would have done if he continued, but I think, like you said, I think he would have been, I suppose, pretty much odds-on favourite for the win. I mean, even Vietti, the actual eventual race winner, mentioned that it was a shame that Agora was out, because I think he thought he was probably going to be the guy that he'd be fighting with. But yeah, that's the just the way these things go, and hopefully I rests up and can come back, and so it's more importantly than anything, be fit for his MotoGP season next year, because obviously that's probably the most important thing. But it'd be great to see him have it's his last year in the class. It'd be good to see him have a tilt at the Moto2 title and actually bring it home this time.
Yeah, completely agree. At the moment, for me, he's the most experienced, and I think we're just seeing, especially you just mentioned on the Carrick front, I'll touch that in a second, but we're just seeing Garcia just starting to get his weekends aren't going perfect. It's just his first 6, 7, 8 rounds of the season, he was phenomenal, faultless, didn't make any mistakes, played perfect races, and now it just looks like no matter what he tries, something always ends up just going slightly awry, and that's just catching him out and costing him points at the moment. And I think he's very much left his team out of over the last 2 rounds by not capitalising at all in his basically you said 2 points out of 50, so you would imagine at this point Garcia would have put big points into him. Obviously gets the penalty today, and then was unable to take anything off him. Really, 2 points is absolutely nothing really in the grand scheme of things, considering I'd imagine Oyagora probably thought a good 20, 16 points, like you said, has gone out the window after that crash on Saturday morning. The Calix resurgence is an interesting one for me, because Fermin Aldeguer struggled all weekend, couldn't start, couldn't stop, couldn't turn, couldn't do anything. I genuinely only think I saw him maybe 2 or 3 times in the whole coverage of the weekend.
He got nerfed out the way at one point.
His teammate, on the other hand,
time I saw him, I think.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, from bad to worse. His teammate, on the other hand, somehow didn't shred his tires. For me, that's more interesting than why Aldeguer was missing. It was just one of those weekends where it looked like Alonso, no matter what he did, just was able to keep some tyre, which was really good to see, because he's been fast all year long, just cannot keep his tyre. And it was starting to get a bit of a worry, because Predis are known for being temperamental in terms of trying to keep them from wearing out too fast, and he looks like a rider that just is absolutely full tilt everywhere at every lap, and you're thinking, how does this play out? Like, because he's not going to bend the tire into his own kind of mold and be able to make it last. But somehow in this track at this weekend, he's managed to do it. So maybe found some setting with the bike. Maybe it was him who made the difference. But even in the early laps, he still looked like he was on a qualifying lap every lap. So it was an interesting one. I'd like to see what you think of that in a second. But it definitely looks like WP at their home track here in Austria, and the Calyx overall have just made a big step back towards the front. As again, that's 2 races in a row that have been won by WP suspension on the Calyx. So, yeah, it's probably too early to tell if it's going to be the Calyx for the rest of the year that's the strongest bike. Because I still think even if Calyx is the stronger bike, I think Iagoro is so strong on the Motogp Xtra chassis. I think he can still be up there fighting for wins. And Garcia, with Garcia dropping points over the last couple of rounds, I'm starting to think, is it going to be a bit of an Arbolino season now where he just starts to stutter and misfire for the rest of the year? So I'm really interested to see what he does in Aragon, because we've had a couple of rounds now with Garcia looking not the Garcia that was top of the championship, winning races and putting in these brilliant performances over the whole weekend. What do you think of the Calyx? Do you think it's just time on the Pirelli really that's got them back, and same with WP, it's just time really and data? That's probably the only thing it's put down to?
Yeah, it's there now, isn't it? The thing is, there's so many Calyxes on the grid, there's like over 20, isn't there? So, or there's probably about 20, I don't know exactly, but it's around that number. All like half season's worth of data, they've had time to crunch that, they've been able to figure it out. Obviously WP, they're figuring out there's a cost of testing here. But again, I think they're starting to sort of find their feet with it. I mean, once you find a good setting with the suspension, I guess it's pretty much there, isn't it? I mean, I guess I'm not going to claim I already know particularly how it works, but suspension is suspension. Like, you're going to set it differently for each track, but it's always going to work the same. So once you get it sort of dialed in, working correctly, then I guess it's going to pretty much work everywhere. So I suppose it's one of those things that once they finally sorted it, they seem to be back. And like you say, obviously 2 races in a row where it's been won by Calyx, and I think the last 4 races in a row, it's been the top Calyx has also been WP suspension. So I think they're there now. I think it could even potentially be the better combination, but it also could be the fact that it's the sort of the official kind of teams that are running it, like with Red Bull KTM, and you've got Aspar, so they've just got the better riders. So it could be that as well, to be fair, and just the better team, so they're going to be the ones to capitalise when the Calyx is working. But yeah, it does seem like that the Calyx is pretty much there now. Does put a bit of a spotlight, maybe more, not necessarily even on the Motogp Xtra, but on the speed up team itself, because they've always been pretty hit and miss. But again, like Agora was going to be pretty good here. And I think you're a little bit harsh on Garcia, because Garcia's weekend was not that bad, really. He qualified quite well. He was running in a decent position. He just then lost so many places when he got the long lap. Wasn't he he was still in the top 10, wasn't he, when he got the long lap? So it was
7th, I think.
So if 7th on a bad day, that's pretty good. He put in a 7th place ride, effectively. I know he got the long lap, but his pace was good enough for that position. So that's really what you should probably look at, because it's very easy to get the penalties. We've seen it happen throughout the season, and he was quite unlucky to lose as many spots as he did. And Austria is just one of those circuits where he made the mistake to transgress, don't get me wrong, but I don't think he was that far off, and he did finish 4th at Silverstone as well. So it's not like he's been nowhere the last 2 weekends. His pace has been okay, so he's not completely dropped off a cliff. So it does seem more like Aldeguer out of the 4 of them is the one that's struggling as of late. And yeah, we've always had that speed up team be hit and miss, but it seems like the the MT Helmets team is there week in, week out with at least one of the riders, which has never been the case for speed up. So it perhaps shines a light more on them than it does the chassis. I don't know, but yeah, I think obviously overall it wasn't obviously the result that Garcia wanted, but it wasn't a terrible weekend. And I do think that the Calyx is probably maybe just marginally the better bike now, and definitely you've got the better teams probably using the Calyx, and you've got some of the best riders. I mean, like Dixon, for example, has probably been the best rider of the last 4 rounds quite comfortably. So if you look at his actual results compared to everybody else, Agora was probably up there with him, but obviously missing this weekend. So Joe Roberts, for example, we were saying on how many podcasts ago that Joe Roberts could still tilt for the title if the Calyx becomes the best bike. Absolutely nowhere this weekend. So yeah, it's weird. None of the championship guys really wanted to win it this weekend.
Yeah, and you did mention there for me and Alligator, so I want to go back to him quickly. His championship has to be done now. There's no way. Like, I think the move to Pirelli has definitely been a downfall in him because, like, if we go back to what Ducati signed last year, he was absolutely, he couldn't do anything wrong last year at the end of the year. And then he got this year where he showed speed, but he always had speed. He just didn't always put it together. And this year so far, well, he's, where did he even finish today? Did he finish today?
He finished, but I think he was like
such
16,
a bad weekend,
wasn't he?
So again,
He
finished
basically
outside
didn't
the
finish.
points,
Yeah,
which is
it's as good as a crash.
exactly.
At least if you crashed out of third
literally is.
place, like you could say, "Oh well, I could have finished third."
Yeah, there's argument to that as well. But is there any way you can argue the championship can come back to him, or he can have it go on a run, or can do anything after what you've seen in the first 11 races?
I mean, mathematically, of course, it's still possible, but I mean, at this point, I think Jake Dixon's got more of a chance to win the championship than him. There's not that many points between the two of those. And if you're looking at the form, then which, by the way, I don't think he's going to win it either. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying, he's so out of it that some guy that missed like the first 3 rounds of the season and didn't score for like the first 5 rounds has got about the same amount of chances he has. So, yeah, his championship's dropped off a cliff. I mean, the Pirelli tyres have obviously harmed him a little, but I don't know if it's that much because he was pretty much fine until the summer break and then has just not scored since the summer break, effectively. So he's lost like 50 points there by just a track that he won last year. So, yeah, and then it was a track where I can't remember where he finished last year at Austria, to be fair, but, probably wasn't 16th, I'm going to have a guess. He probably crashed or something, I don't know, but it's like his season was fine until that point. I mean, I know we dissed him like a bit and saying, he wasn't quite performing, but Qatar, you could kind of let people off. That was the first round. Portimao, he made a mistake, had jumped the start, so put himself at a disadvantage. Again, I think in Austin something had happened and he got held back in the pack and he didn't have enough time to catch back up, but it was a decent result. Decent result in Portimao still as well, even with the jump start. He obviously won at Jerez. Mugello, he didn't qualify, did he? He got knocked off there, didn't he? I think. Yeah. So he didn't do qualifying because he picked up an injury, like somehow he woke up and hurt his neck or something. So then he started further back because of that, and then he got knocked off. So that was some points that went cold, and it wasn't really his fault because I mean it wasn't like he crashed and wasn't able to qualify. Something happened outside the track to him, to be fair. I don't want to go through all this season, but he was on the podium at Assen. He won at Sachsenring. His season wasn't. It was a bit hit and miss, and obviously Catalonia crashing along that. But again, he was leading when he did that. Like his pace was there in the first half of the season. The odd thing that went his way, and it was like, well, he's got the pieces, so like it almost felt like he could still put it together. But now he's not even got the pace anymore. So I don't know. Don't know what's happened to him, but to actually answer the question, I don't think he's going to win the championship now, no, which is a surprise because even before the summer break, I thought he was still probably going to come back and do it, or I thought there was still a decent chance of it, but now it's just not going to happen.
Not with the way Garcia and Iogura are putting on points. Garcia, like I said, personally for me, I feel like he's dropped the ball over the last few rounds. I know P4 last time out and obviously was having a decentish race, but the way he's been this year so far, P4 to me is not a bad result, but that's kind of an underperformance from him, considering how good he's been this year, where he's been right at the front every race, battling for wins, battling his teammate Alligator when it all works out. But for me, I would really like to know what the issue is. Is it like you mentioned, or I mentioned tires, and you kind of tried to make the argument that he can do it on these tires, but if it's not that, it's the same bike, it's the same team. Pressure, maybe, yeah, Ducati contract signed, but usually you see the opposite when a rider signs such a lucrative contract and a big contract to move up into the next class. Pressure's off, they relax, and they ride free, and it kind of comes easy. So far this year, anything but really. Maybe you could also argue that he put himself under more pressure because he thinks that I'm on the way to Ducati, I should win this championship. He's kind of somehow kind of put himself at a mental disadvantage, put too much stress on himself, made more mistakes. Each time he makes mistakes, tries harder, and just kind of snowballs into what we've seen so far. But for me, I think he just needs now to try and reset, just have a good rest of the season. Another 8-9 races left in this year, so I still think he just needs to kind of reset, get some form going into 25 and start the season with Ducati on a front foot, because I think there's no point now continuing to override potentially crashing yourself when there's no real actual potential of winning this title after the last 4, 5, 6 rounds and just the lack of form. Now, someone who's out of his seat but managed to win a race again. He is a pretty convincingly good rider at this racetrack. He's won here before. Chester Vignetti is out of the IO squad and goes and wins the race. So what do you make of that, Rhys?
Yeah, well, basically, as you said, it's a Vietti special track. He always goes well here. He won back-to-back. Did he win the year before as well? I don't know, but no, I think Agora won the year before, but it was up there, I think, if I do remember correctly. But yeah, he clearly just gets on with the circuit, so there's not really a lot else to say about him. He got pole position. He controlled the race fantastically. Only mistake was the false neutral, which it wasn't a false neutral. It was a real neutral. Actually, I will give the gearbox credit there. He just misshifted through, but even still, he hit neutral when he didn't want to. Ran a bit wide, lost a second or so, and then they kept with him for a few laps. So perhaps as he just built his confidence back up again, and then he just dropped him, and he was pretty comfortably in front of them by the end. So yeah, he had better pace than everybody else. Didn't wear out his tyre. I mean, he beat Pedro Acosta here last year. I mean, that kind of says everything, really, because him and Acosta were miles ahead of everybody else, if I remember. So, yeah, clearly he works pretty well at this circuit. Vietti is the ultimate Lorenzo Baldassarri clone. Like, he just turns up and just performs at, like, one race a season, and then just disappears. I mean, he's been getting there as of late. It's a bit harsh to say that. He's been a bit better. He was decent at Sachsenring. I don't know if the results actually ended up showing that, but he was pretty good there. Silverstone, did he get on the podium with Silverstone as well? So
Silverstone had a really good last lap and came back and made a couple of overtakes.
Yeah, so he's clearly getting there. I mean, he's now obviously out of his seat, which I don't know about that one, because it's not like he's been like the bike has been really good and he's been terrible. The bike's not been good and he's also not been very good. But as soon as the bike's kind of there, he started to perform. But I guess they want to give Onchu more chance because he was injured and he's a rookie, so they wanted to sign Colin, clearly, and someone had to make way. Whether maybe Vietti himself wanted to leave, you don't know what's happening behind the scenes. I mean, I don't know where he's going to particularly go, if I'm honest. I mean, he's a good rider, so he'll find somewhere, but just he's chewing through the seats in the class. He can't go back to Fantic, he's probably not going to go to another one of the sort of Pabera mobility group bikes, so there's a few of them sort of ruled out there. You're not going to jump on a forward racing. Maybe he'll try to jump on the speed up, who knows, but yeah, it's certainly he's just a bit of a mystery, isn't he? He just sometimes he's absolutely, like today, he's absolutely unbeatable. No one could beat him. No one could lay a glove on him. Maybe Agora could have done if he was here, but Agora crashed in practice and put himself out. So you've got to be there to do it. But it just 19 out of 20 races a season, he's like a bit of a Schrotter, average Moto2 rider that can perhaps pick up a podium on his day, whereas one, maybe 2 races a season, he's this unstoppable force that could beat Pedro Acosta on the same bike, kind of thing.
The big question I have is, we've seen IO sign riders like a Remy Gardner, who, similar to Vietti, couple of races a year, very good, goes missing, finishes 15th every other week, and he made him a world champion. Now, you could argue maybe that year the field wasn't as strong as it has been in the past, but regardless, he got Remy Gardner finishing first, second, pretty much every week between him and his teammate. Again, I understand they wanted Colin to come up and they wanted the next kind of KTM Husqvarna talent to be on the books at IO. But for me, I just felt like the Vietti, when he signed for that KTM, I just felt like, yeah, that's right. They'll work it out, they'll understand, they'll get a grip together, and he'll become probably a Moto2 title winner in a year or two to come, because he will kind of turn around with them. So the fact of giving him a year on a bike that's on new suspension, that's kind of underperforming slightly as well. And again, you made a solid point. As soon as the bike looks like it's turning around, he has been a lot closer to the front, looking stronger. He's won a race now on it. So I think it is harsh for him. And I actually feel bad for him, because I do feel like that he was given a year or two with the whole IO setup, that he might actually turn around and do something in the class. But we'll never know, really, because not many better teams in the class anymore than that IO seat. So it's going to be in a way a downgrade from next year. He might end up on a Bosco Scurry, and even though he might go back from the WP suspension. So it's not great for his career, but you could argue as well that he hasn't been good enough at the start of the year, but I just feel like now that the bike is coming good and he's after obviously having a bit of a resurgent in his form, that it was a weird timing to go for it. I'm fairly sure you could have left Colin Vire. I know he is one of the bigger kind of young fellas in Moto 3, so he probably is eager to get off the 250s and up into Moto 2, so you could see that too. But surely you sign him, maybe you could sign Colin Vire for 26, go up, and then you have him under contract, you have him, he's going over, no other team's going to sweep in and take him. He gets another year to kind of sharpen his racecraft.
Yeah, he's not going to sign that though, is he? If he wants to go to Moto 2, he'll just go and sign for somebody else. That's the thing, isn't it?
True, but
like, you're not going to wait another year in Moto 3. You're going to just go and sign for the guy that's actually going to put you up into Moto 2 next year.
But if you're getting Rebel IO coming in saying wait a year and then you have that seat, I think a lot of people jump at that.
True, but he's also got the pick of the types of Mark VDS and the team that he's already with, like the Moto 2 version of that. And
true,
he's
but
probably
like,
got offers from the top teams. You see,
I can see that too. But if I'm Colin, you're making sure that you're getting in the IO squad, because it's proven to bring riders through and get world champions and then get them into GP, which surely is his goal, to get a world championship under his belt. Well, he's not going to do it this year, but again, maybe you're right. Maybe Mark Viesa put a nice contract in front of him and he's decided to go and go down the line that I'm saying just a year earlier. But I just feel that for Vietti it's a bit hard done, because I don't think he's been deserving to be 6-7 months in and then just out of his contract. It's a bit of a weird signing if they were going to just give him half a season and then kind of send him on his way. But overall it's not great for Vietti, because regardless of where he goes now, it's a step back. He'll probably become more inconsistent again, and he could end up probably doing a Baldassare and going to World Super Sport, maybe Superbike. Well, at this rate, you never know. I still think maybe somewhere down the line he maybe takes Frankie Morbidelli's seat at VR46 somehow. I think he's probably been prepped for that seat for a couple of years, but maybe never turn into the rider they probably want. And if Frankie doesn't kind of pick up his form at all in the class, I think he could be on his way out as well. He could probably end up going to World Superbike. So maybe Vietti somehow makes his way back into GP, or he makes it to GP, not back. But I think the VR46 kind of bloodline still kind of lives on there, and he still probably will see his way into GP that way.
He's not the last one, isn't he, Vietti, as well? Like, there's no other VR46 guys like sort of at that level with him, like Moto 2, Moto 3.
Yeah.
There's no one behind him, because they kind of stopped putting people through now, I guess. But yeah,
since Valentino's retired, there's a bit of a lull, really, because I think there's a couple very low down, but like
Bertelli was one, wasn't he?
Like,
but
Italian.
he's not really. And Bartolini, the two of those, they've not really worked out. Sura, I guess the last two just haven't, like the last few just haven't worked. So
I think as well, in terms of, I think it's easier when Valentino's at the track each day, or he's kind of when he was racing at that level, it's easier to keep in the routine of going training with them, keeping them, getting new ones, and kind of keeping that academy going. Now he's away racing cars, it's probably not as much of a probably priority as well. He also has Bezzecchi in the top class. He has Pecco winning championship. So I suppose in a way he's
achieved the goal.
3 riders in the top class. He's achieved the goal, but also like Pecco isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Yeah. Morbidelli, if he turns his career on, could still have a very strong GP career and maybe challenge for wins and maybe make a career out of it if he ever kind of finds that form again. Bezzecchi, I think, is going to be around for another 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years yet. I think he's a long point left in his career. So for me, I think it's, as much as I understand that there's no one in the pipeline immediately, but in a way maybe it would turn out to be a bit of a logjam, because if there was a Moto 3 rider who was looking to move up into Moto 2, where do they put him if they're going to try and keep Vietti in Moto 2 in that team, or get him into a VR46 kind of sponsored or a team that's going to connect to him? So I could see a logjam when there's probably not enough seats in the top class for all these young Italians come through, if there was a few in the Medi. But I do agree for now, Vietti he's the last. I remember him signing in Moto 3, he was in the Moto 3 team, and he was kind of the very highly regarded, but he's probably the last of the ones that will make the GP out of that kind of crop that towards the end of Valentino's career. So Pedro Costa has been brilliant for most of this year so far. He has made mistakes. He's on a decent bike, but again, KTM look like they've gone slightly missing again this year, unfortunately. As Acosta gains a bit of understanding of this class, the more he learns, it seems the more he struggles, because it seems like he's understanding the bike more, and that's probably in a way affecting him more, because of late, Binder and this weekend Miller as well were much closer to him, as well as he had a terrible race weekend. He had, was it 3 crashes? 4? 3?
He had so many crashes, didn't he? I think it was...
I've lost count.
He had the big one. That,
I know.
And then he had one at like the penultimate turn. Yeah, I think it was at least 3 or 4. Probably 4.
Yeah, definitely 3 I can remember. And the 185 mile one was just scary, Rhys. I actually rarely get to see any of Friday practice because of being at work, but I was actually able to see that live, and I saw it live, and man, it was... It reminded me a lot of Mugello 13 Marquez. Similar speeds. Marquez, that was a bit quicker for Marquez, but just so scary. And it shows how easily things can go wrong. After he crashed in turn 2, did a whole lap after that, and then with the first lap again on up at speed, hadn't gotten the centre of the tyre temperature, and just as soon as he touched brakes, he was down. It was a real scary one.
Yeah, it was using the hard tyre, I think, wasn't he? Apparently the hard tyre was just too hard, so he was going out exploring with that, and he just ended up crashing. And yeah, literally just first touch of the brakes, had a bit too much lean angle, not enough temperature of the tyre, just front's locked, straight down he went. And yeah, stood right down the track. You know, the bike smacked the wall, and then when it tumbled to the gravels, the bike was completely written off. I mean, he got away with it relatively okay, just stood down the road, didn't tumble too much. So yeah, he got back up, and the leathers were a bit second hand, but they'd done their job. And he was straight away debriefing with them when he got back to the pits. So yeah, I don't think Pedro was too bothered by it. Could have been a nasty crash, like you say, but it never seems to be the really fast ones that are as bad. It is when they're slower, when you sort of get slammed down into the floor more, or get collected by another rider because they don't have time to avoid you, kind of thing. So yeah, it tends to be these quite fast crashes. People tend to actually get up from those, which I guess is where the kit is really tested, isn't it? So I suppose that's why they're okay to do that, because the kit's so rigid and good these days. But yeah, I mean, Acosta's weekend was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. It was by far his worst weekend in the class so far. He was no better than Fernandez by the end of it. He was battling with Fernandez in the actual main race. So yeah, it just didn't work for him at all. Like he kind of was saying there, that as he's understanding the bike more, I think he's sort of falling back. But I think it's just the fact that he started off so well because the Ducatis weren't as dialed in. And then as soon as the Ducatis have got more dialed in, they're just so far away. He's probably overstretching the mark now and trying to get back to those positions. Like he's running in podium positions, up until like Catalunya. Basically, he was fighting for a podium in either a sprint or a main race, like every weekend. I mean, he didn't always finish there or faded back, but at least it was part of the race where he was fighting for those positions. He was chasing after that podium again, that victory in Catalunya, crashed out there. And that's basically where it ended. That turn 10 gravel trap, that was basically where his good results have ended, particularly. I mean, he's had some good rides in there, don't get me wrong. He's been beating the other KTM guys. But after that point, I think the bike was too far off. I think he's pushed too hard to try and make the difference. This weekend, just all the crashes he had in practice, doesn't matter how good you are, it's going to take your confidence away a little bit. And just all the track time, all the data that you've lost from that, I think just put him on the back foot. And he wasn't able to recover. So, yeah, it's... like you say, Binder and Miller are looking a bit better in comparison to him, but that's not really that they're better because their positions were pretty similar. I think also as well, I know technically they treat them as like 4 factory bikes, but they're getting parts that Acosta probably isn't getting yet. I mean, I know they were giving him parts pretty soon, but they've got the better staff in the Red Bull KTM team. That's why they're in the KTM one and not the Gas team. So he's going to be a little bit behind perhaps with development and setup and things like that. So, yeah, pretty bad weekend for him. Just got to sort of forget it and just move on to the next one now.
Like Iacora, Digi, very good start to the weekend with his contract. Unfortunately, a crash as well was Friday. I think it was free practice, or in practice on Friday evening. And he's done his shoulder. He also did it in Sachsenring. He got popped out and popped back in. This one can become quite scary and quite a bit of a horrible one very fast, because the more it pops out, the more likely it's to pop out. Remember Marquez in the 18, 19, 20, he was popping in and out at will really until he went and got surgery. Shoulder injuries for bike races are sometimes career ending. They can be one of the bigger weaknesses is in their second part of their career, we could say. So it's something that for Digi, it'll definitely be something he needs to keep an eye on. Again, it's a difficult one because obviously you're going to crash. There's no way you can stop it. He's on the limit ever. It's going to happen, but the fact his shoulder's popping in and out, that's just a worrying one because that can just take the longevity off his career. And he's at such a good point in his career now. He's in a kind of a 18 months, kind of a 12 months to 18 month purple patch. So what can Digi really do, Rhys, in this situation? Because he's riding very well. He's getting the most out of that GP23. The only one who's doing better is Marquez, and that's your the top rider in the class. So you can't really argue with that. He's demolishing his teammate. He's way quicker than Alex Marquez. He's beating Frankie Morbidelli regularly. So he's the best of the other Ducatis, other than the Marquez and the GP24s of Pramac with Jorge Martinez, who factory bikes. So he's having a really good season. So this niggly little injury that's coming in is starting to worry me a small bit. I don't know what you think about it, but for me, it's something that I'm not looking forward to seeing Digi, because he seems that every time he crashes, he does seem to just pick up a little knock or niggle here. So I'm slightly worried for poor Digi, really.
Yeah, it's kind of a surprise because it's like how things have changed so much. I mean, I remember what was not even like 5 years ago, like you say, when Marcus used to have it, he'd pop it out and he'd just come back out in the same session. It was crazy, but you just don't see that anymore because people realise the consequences of the injury. I think Marquez's arm injury that then followed, I think, has definitely changed the way that people approach these things. I think they definitely think, oh, it's better to sit out on the sidelines than to keep going. Like, I feel like you see this a lot more now these days, where like rider will pick up an injury in sort of practice and either be declared unfit, so the fitness tests are probably like more rigorous, or rule themselves, or the team rule themselves out. I think there has been some lessons learnt from that Marquez sort of shenanigans where like he basically shattered his arm, got it plated and tried to ride about 5 days later, and well, that pretty much has ended his career, and not ended his career, but you know, his competitive winning career at that point was just basically completely ended. And whether they're able to return to it in the future, we don't know. He has won races since then, but you know, nowhere near what he did previously. So yeah, I think maybe some lessons have been learnt from that. It is one of those things, if you dislocate it and keep dislocating it, it just comes out easier. So next time you have a crash, it's more likely to come out. I don't know what his plan is. I don't know whether it's just to obviously sit out this race to make sure he definitely doesn't trigger it again and just let it heal a little bit, or is he going to have surgery? Because I believe that issue with it popping out can be fixed through surgery. Because I mean, that's what Marquez had, I think, at the start of 2019. I think maybe he had that, or it might have been the start of 20 actually, because I think he hadn't done that much the pre-season because of stuff. I can't remember exactly, but yeah, he had it around that time, sort of the 19, 20 kind of that period before sort of the arm break and stuff. So hopefully Digi can get that sorted, because like you say, it can be a nasty little one. And yeah, hopefully he's on the mend and we can see him back at the next round. But it's like I say, it's sometimes you're still kind of thinking that old mindset. You're like, oh, surprised he hasn't come back out. But I think things have changed so much now, which for the better. But it's just like in the past, like people would just, you know, even within the same session, I still remember like Marquez would have a crash, he'd hold his shoulder, run like basically back into the Honda like garage motorhome bit, and he'd come back out. Like he'd obviously go in there basically for about 30 seconds, come back out and get straight back on the spare bike kind of thing. And you shouldn't do that. And it's good that people are not doing that anymore.
Yeah, completely agree that it's being taken a bit more serious now, and that there's life after your bike career as well. So I think a lot of people probably, when Marquez went through so many kind of troubles with his injuries, I think people thought that, well, if it can happen to Marquez, it can happen to anyone. So I think everyone's maybe taking a step, because even Dennis Anchu, who injured himself not so long ago, took a nice long bit of time off, and I was quite happy that he missed a good few races because he just let himself heal and then rush back. Because again, a rookie in the class, you could kind of forgive him for maybe coming back too early, thinking that he needs to be there every week trying to learn stuff. So again, that different attitude has seemingly kind of come down through the class, and it's probably one of the only positives to maybe come out of that Marquez Horret crash in 2020, that people now maybe take more small niggly injuries a bit more serious. And I think maybe the standard of the medical tests are being upped and made tougher, because as well, even when Iagora got declared unfit, I was very surprised because I saw a broken hand and I kind of thought, well, like,
I've seen people ride for that before, like
Yeah, I was kind of like broken out. Then the more you think about it, you're like, yeah,
back out, but
literally, yeah. So it's one of those things. I'm quite happy he didn't ride, but at the same time, when I first saw it, I was kind of like, really? It was the same with Joe Roberts when he broke his, and because he was sitting down in the pits and he was kind of giving the thumbs up.
Wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah,
He'd had surgery though, so that was a bit
those...
different. I think it's now the rules. If you had anaesthetic, you can't ride. Which, when you think about it, it's like, actually, yeah, how did they let Lorenzo ride back in the day when he literally just had anaesthetic in him like the day before? And they're not allowed the same numbing stuff that they were allowed before and stuff now as well. I think they used to have the injections. I don't think they're allowed that anymore. I think they have to just take paracetamol and stuff. So I think these injuries are just more painful as well. Whereas like in the past, they could have Dr. Costa inject their hand before the race and they just can't feel anything and they can just get out. But yeah, I mean, again, it's all for the good, because especially when it's a hand injury or something like that, you need that hand to control the bike. If that goes wrong in the middle of the race, you lose strength, you could easily cause a pretty big incident.
Definitely, completely agree. But we're going to move on now to Jorge Martin's penalty in the sprint. He set out from the start in the sprint with one goal, and that was to get ahead of Pecco and try and control it. And it just looked immediately in the sprint that Pecco had more drive grip, that he could just get out of the corner and kind of level Jorge Martin pretty easily. And that was kind of how it happened. So Jorge gets ahead of him, outbrakes himself into turn one, just tries to stay ahead of him, and then goes on a weird kind of outside line into the chicane. Turn two, goes straight on, doesn't drop to second, and then everybody immediately knew penalty incoming, including his biggest rival Pecco Bagnaia, who was still on the track with him. So, Rhys, is there any argument for Jorge Martin that he didn't lose time, or he did lose time? Is there any argument that he didn't deserve this penalty?
No, I mean, the rules are clear cut. That's just how it works. I don't actually like that rule very much, but it is a rule. So if you go through a chicane, you lose a second, you've got to lose a second. I mean, I always think, well, if you've got to lose a second, why is the penalty not just a second? But, we said this, the time penalty things get a bit confusing and it's hard to follow the race. So it's definitely better that it's kind of if you give yourself away a second, that's it. The timing screens are all correct and you just don't get your long lap. But yeah, as soon as he carried on going, pretty clear cut, he was going to get the long lap. There's not really an excuse for it. I mean, I still think, in my opinion, if you've gone through a chicane and you've lost a position because of it, then that's probably enough. I mean, remember what Acosta was at Assen last year, where he lost the front, went through the chicane and picked up a long lap penalty. It's like, are you serious? This guy's almost crashed, lost the position and come back on, and he didn't lose a second or whatever. But again, it's the rules are the rules. So yeah, no defending him there. He should have known better. I mean, I suppose it was a calculated risk that he took, that maybe he lost enough time where it was a second, or just thought, if I could keep the pressure on Bagnaia, maybe he'll make a mistake or whatever. I guess that's all it was. And in the end, I guess it was a risk worth taking because he finished second either way. But, and perhaps he thought, oh, well, if I don't lose a second, maybe I can not lose that much time on the long lap and kind of work it out. I don't know what he was playing exactly. He wasn't very happy about it either way anyway. But at the end of the day, everybody immediately knew he was going to get a penalty, and surely he knew that himself as well. So, I don't know, is it easier just to give up the second? Maybe he didn't want to lose the place to Marquez, maybe that was more what it was, but ended up losing that position anyway because of the penalty. So it seems kind of like, why just pretend that you didn't go through the chicane?
Yeah, I feel like there's a bit of stubbornness and a bit of a chip on the shoulder from Jorge Martin when he has these situations, because it seems straight away he made the mental switch straight away when he came back on track. It's like, that just didn't happen. I'm not losing time for that. And do you think if Marquez doesn't crash, Jorge Martin still gets second?
No, I don't think so.
So I think that's even a bigger risk, as like he could.
But Bagnaia may also not have won, so you don't know what was going to happen with that Marquez not crashing. But
yeah, that's true. The big thing for me with that is that just when he comes back off track, surely he has a quick look over his shoulder, and what he does is he leaves Marquez up inside, he cuts Marquez back, and then he just does him into turn 4, and then he just goes after Bagnaia, and that's the right way to do it for me. And even at that, that's me kind of being a bit cheeky saying that
you still wouldn't lose a second
position to Marquez.
I think you have to lose a second. I don't think it's actually about giving up a spot. So yeah,
I know it's not the spot, but I still think that it shows a lot more. At least if
if you make like a vague attempt, like even if it's a bit fake, exactly, like, to let someone through, they could perhaps maybe let it slip. It's like, well, you have given up time, whereas he was like level with him going into the corner and just behind him coming out. So yes, in theory, he didn't gain from going through there, but he also didn't lose anything. So, or he lost very little, I guess. But that's the thing. If it says in the rules you've got to give up a second, you've got to give up a second, whether you agree or not with it. It's one of those things. I mean, I think it is perhaps maybe a bit of a silly rule in a lot of scenarios where, as long as you don't gain time, or like, you're not doing it consistently all the time, then it's probably not an issue. But the rule says you got to lose a second, so you've got to lose a second. He chose not to do it, and he got a long lap, but then he was somehow surprised by that. Which, I mean, didn't he have some penalty drama here last year as well, that he was surprised when he caused that collision into turn 1? So it's
collision in turn 1. Did he get a penalty for the Marini incident into that same corner?
I don't think so. I don't think he did, and I think we were like, yeah, that's probably fair enough, because Marini did just like basically try and lean on him like he wasn't.
Yeah, Marini should like hold him on the outside. Yeah,
which just it doesn't work. So yeah, it was an interesting weekend for him, that one, wasn't it?
I think the big issue with this penalty is that the argument is, if there's grass outside, you make that mistake, you're running through the grass, you lose 4, 5, 6 seconds if you don't crash. So the argument is for a lot of people is that, well, by us allowing you to stay in the race and not fall, lose 5, 6 seconds, whatever, is that you lose a small bit of time for your mistake, or still being penalised for making a mistake in a race, which I understand. Yeah. A lot of people just don't like it. A lot of people just say put grass back there and they don't make these mistakes. They can't do that, because at the end of the day, if the grass is there, if there's gravel there, it's still a safety issue as much as people won't admit it is.
You can't put grass there either, because that runoff is track. Like, it's because there's the other layout.
Yeah, exactly.
So, like, in that scenario, there's nothing. It's not like they've added tarmac there. Like, that's another layout of the circuit. So
exactly, exactly.
So, I mean, you can maybe argue that with grass, they make more of an attempt to stay on the circuit as well. So I don't know. Yeah, like, it's easy to say, oh, they lost time, but then they probably would took more time. I mean, we've seen not necessarily go through the gravel. It's not always slow. We've seen Rossi show that one before.
Yeah. The race is won from gravel.
Yeah, it's a good job it wasn't green.
Jeez, imagine the fallout if that was green. He got pushed on the green, and the arguments. Thank God, back then we could just go through the gravel and get away with it. But we did touch there briefly on Marquez crashing in the sprint. That's 3 crashes and 4 sprints for Marc Marquez. He said it was a hard one to take afterwards, with him saying basically that it was a nailed-on podium and he felt he could catch Pecco. I feel like that's... I don't want to say a rookie mistake for Marquez, but I just feel like that Pecco's so good at controlling the race that Marquez kind of got lulled into a bit of a false sense of security that I was catching him. I think if that went on another 2 or 3 laps, I think Marquez loses another 10th or 2 when Pecco puts his foot down, as he does nearly in every race. Now then again, I know Pecco has a mistake in him, so you could argue that Marquez definitely thought that he could force Pecco into a mistake, which could be true, but I just feel Pecco is controlling the race and Marquez is gaining and it goes over his limit. It was just, again, I know he hasn't won a race, so I can see the argument from both coins, but it's just, I just felt when I saw him crash, I was just like, not again, like, you don't need to do this. You're now going to be like 4th. Roughly now at this point, he's absolutely no chance of winning this championship. Again, at this point, we all know it's going to be
I think he's probably already made his mind up on that, though. I think that's why the crashes are coming.
100%, I do agree, yeah. But, like, is he going to spend the rest of the year crashing or winning? Because, again, we've seen how this plays out, and he ends up out of the sport for 2.5 years with injuries. So I think, again, it was a small crash and all, but he's still playing with the limits because he wants that race, and I think he's getting more and more frustrated. And I think we have Aragon next, and I think after whether we had a dud tyre or if there was a mistake with the front wheel in the main race, the whole sag again, if there's more issues for Mark, and he felt like he could win the main race as well today, even though he wasn't publicly saying it, but anyone again could see that his race pace with these preheated tyres was really good in the last third, so maybe he could have tried something with Pecco. If just throw back our minds back to Jerez when Mark is with the Ducati is on it, he does have a chance of winning, so he definitely will feel frustrated about that one, but that is motor racing, I suppose. But what do you think, Rhys? Was it, again, foolish for him to try and win the sprint, or are we just is this just what Marquez is now? He's just going to win or bin, I suppose?
I think he's probably just so frustrated now by the bike spec difference. I think at this point it's like the last few rounds, it's been like, in his sort of own words, it's so big that he can't compete with them, whereas here he felt like he could. So I think he thought there was probably a chance to actually beat him. And it's not even necessarily about winning the race. It is to an extent, but it's also like, well, if I could beat Bagnaia on last year's bike, I can sort of rub it in, because he's going to be his teammate next year. And since the beginning, that's been the thing. I mean, there was a whole rumour after they crashed at like Portimao that apparently they had the argument about it after, and Mark said something along the lines that you're just annoyed that I could already beat you. And stuff like that. So it's all a pride, all an ego game, really. At the end of the day, yes, obviously he wants to get the win as well, but if you can try and beat Bagnaia at a track where Bagnaia's dominated before on the bike from the year before, that is at this point pretty far off the current bike. It would be quite impressive, and a bit of just a bit of needle to stick in there. So I think that's what it is. I think also, like we've said with the other two crashing, like there's no coincidence that every time a top Ducati rider crashes, it's because they lose the front. It's the front end isn't very good on the bike. So when you try and push it that bit further, and with this new tyre of this year, it seems to push it even more. I know we had the slightly different one this year, this round, but even still, it's probably providing more grip than the one from last year. And yeah, it's I think that's what we've been seeing. Obviously, we've seen him come from like nowhere and finish on the podium. So like those races, I think it's like he's already mentally decided he's not winning that race. He's just got to find his way through. Like in the main race today, he'd already decided that, well, I can't win this anymore. I can't really get on the podium, so I'll just sort of slowly make my way through because it's all I can do. Whereas when he thinks there's a win on the table, he just pushes that bit further, gets a bit more annoyed, I guess, because I don't know. It's easy to sit here and say, oh, why is he doing that? But it must be very frustrating on the bike to be gaining on the brakes all the time, and then as soon as you come out the corner, they've just gained 3-4 tenths on you. You're just like, so you just push that a bit harder, and down he goes, especially if you've got a bit of a sniff. So yeah, I think he wants that first win. He wants to beat Bagnaia on the old bike again, just to kind of rub it in, and he's probably just frustrated now by how far off that bike is, because even since like Portimao, it's been clear that it was quite a way off, like come out of the last corner, and that gap's only going to have grown. It's not going to have got any smaller.
Next question. Aragon next time out. Can he win anything there?
I was going to say no at this point, because every time he's gone into a weekend, we're like, oh, he could win here, he could win here. It's just not gone his way at all. I mean, Austin, he probably could have maybe won that one if he didn't crash, to be fair. Like, he'd finally got to the front, but again, he had an issue there. Saxon Ring, well, his weekend went down the toilet after the big crash, but potentially would have been with a chance there. So yeah, you get to a track where he's quite good, but Bagnaia is also quite good there, because Bagnaia's battled him before. Now, yes, Marquez had half an arm and a terrible bike, so there is that, there is that element to it, but Bagnaia did beat him there fair and square, so it is the way it is. And I don't think he can go in expecting to do well at these circuits that he's gone so well at before now, because the two he's been to so far, the weekends have been so poor that just haven't really gone to plan. And I think, again, like this weekend, things haven't gone to plan, where, again, he was feeling good. And I think this is why he was so desperate to get out of the team that he's in, because satellite teams have these weekends. You never see this from factory teams, where they have these mistakes and these issues. And, okay, we have seen Bagnaia have ride-out device problems. That's just because they're stupid, the ride-out devices. But you don't see, like, them having tyre issues where they got to change them dead quickly, or like electronics issues in practice where they don't get the lap times in and stuff like that. And yeah, I feel like that's another. It's all kind of stacks up, but no, I don't think he can, because I just think the package just isn't there, and if he tries to push to win, he'll just end up on the ground.
Yeah, you were making the point there, and I was just thinking that this is the exact reason why he took so much liberty this year, but his future, and put himself at risk of not getting a good seat, just because he knew probably pretty early. Probably knew after pre-season. He's like, this
how many times did his bike
ever,
break
just
down? Yeah, in pre-season, it's ridiculous.
So
like he probably could have won a race earlier on in the season if he'd had a full pre-season, because he wouldn't have been adapting so much.
Yeah.
Like he wouldn't have been so slow at like Qatar, and still trying to find the bike at like Austin. Maybe if he got the bike already dialed in there, he probably does win there, because he actually did look like he had good pace. And same with Jerez, and it all stems back to that to an extent.
Yeah, I agree again. So I think the bigger issue this year is obviously the GP 23 to 24 spec isn't what we were probably thinking when he was going there. Everyone thought that he'd have not equal, but like an equal chance as Pecco's winning races this year. And again, if we go back to when he signed for them at the end of last year, everyone was thought that he would wipe the floor with them. He's had a good amount of podiums. He's had a lot of good races. He's not had brilliant qualifying, and he hasn't won a race. So it's been a good step for him again. He's been back to front and been fighting. He's looked like the old Mark, the very old Mark, that kind of all the mind games and the cheekiness, I suppose you could say, is back in him. But the race wins still elude him, and I still think it's going to be a very tough to even Aragon, because you just think a GP24. How is he going to? I just don't think that at this point in his career he's good enough anymore to make that much of a difference on a bike. I just think, again, you touched as well how we both kind of speculate that maybe front end of this Ducati is not what we are made to believe it is. We still think it's probably the weakest point. They just are really good at masking it up with the aero and the ride-out devices and all the gizmos they have on it. So, yeah, it's going to be tough for him, but again, it's another race weekend where he's looked strong and crashed and then had an incident. We're going to touch on his sprint there, or his main race, which he had the right-out device failure. It turns out he wasn't able to enable. Rhys, you have more info on this than I do.
Yeah, he said in an interview after the race that they'd had some sort of issue with the front tyre, I think, on the starting lap. So they swapped this front tyre out. So then for the warm-up lap, he was focusing on getting the temperature into that, and he basically didn't leave himself, I think, like, he didn't set up the right device optimally, because I think the way you engage it and then you have to brake really hard to sort of load the bike up so that it sticks down, because the way it works, it's all like a hydraulic-y, like mechanical system where, like, if you create the force to push it down, it'll stick until you kind of do something to, like, it basically kind of releases something, I suppose, so it allows it to go down further than it normally would. Then it locks there until you then, do another, create the force again yourself. So it's all like a manual system instead of being electronically, like, controlled to go up and down or whatever. So that's the way it works. And yeah, it sounds like he wasn't able to engage it. We saw, again, the consequences of that is that you're going miles slower than everybody else at the start. It's almost like, stalling off the line and not going anywhere, or like missing a gear or something. Everyone comes steaming in, people hit him. Morbidelli, shock, was involved in the incident, which I think, to be fair, not really his fault this time. But it's always seems to be Morbidelli that hits people at the back or has contact with them on these opening laps, on these starts. So perhaps his awareness just isn't there as much as the others, or the reaction times or whatever. But obviously you also get blindsided in the pack. So in no way am I really blaming Morbidelli for it. It's clearly the rider device problem. They both obviously go out wide. And then from that, the race is over. Race is over at that lap. At that point, you're down to 13th place. That's it. You can't come back from that anymore. This is not the olden days where you could do that. That's it. Like, race over. If you're not in the top 5 in the first, like, lap of the race, you're done. You're absolutely done. So that was his race done right there. He rode pretty well back through to do it. To be honest, he was a lot cleaner than I expected, but I think because he'd already gave up on the podium, then he kind of knew he could take his time with the things. I suppose the only touchy thing was when he touched Miller's tyre with his elbow, which was, don't know how he got away with that one, but yeah, fair play. But again, just the rider devices just caused so many problems. I mean, we had the issue that Bagnaia had in Silverstone where it didn't disengage properly, so there was a massive closing speed through farm, and he got sort of swallowed up. And didn't he also have a problem with it in, like, Le Mans? And we've seen so many issues with these devices time and time again. And Miller, not Miller, did Binder have a problem with his in, like, oh no, I was going to say Silverstone. That was did they not disengage the fuel save map, I think, or something?
Yeah.
So I think that was a different issue, but we've seen these things over and over again.
Yeah, and from one Ducati rider to another Ducati rider who had a much better weekend. Pecco is pretty good at Austria. We were banging the drum last year about him basically walking away with the title, and then a week later he gets himself run over in Catalonia. Probably not going to make the same mistake this week, but he was pretty good this weekend, Pecco. Didn't take pole. It was about the only kind of fault I could probably poke at him, but even at that, he doesn't need pole. He's probably...
That was more Martin, I think, than him being... him missing anything. That was more Martin's qualifying prowess.
Definitely, and I think out of all the Ducatis, especially the factories, he is by far the best off the line. He's about the only one that can kind of compete with the KTMs off the line, I think. So once he's in the top, to be honest, once he's on the front 2 rows, he's pretty okay.
Yeah.
He's probably, bar Marquez, probably the best in the world on an opening lap. He seems to make some seriously good decision calls. He makes his decision, sticks with it, and kind of goes with it. He's really good. Just kind of, we've seen it a few times this year where he's had an amazing first lap and put himself into contention of winning a race that has looked out of his grasp. So again, he gets to the front. Martin kind of tries to battle him in both races, but probably one of those race weekends where it's probably best that Martin takes second in both of them. I think nobody's beaten Pecco. Maybe Mark is on equal equipment, but nobody's beaten Pecco in today, I think. But yeah.
yeah, I mean, like Martin tried everything he could, didn't need to beat him. I mean, it was he got in front of him briefly.
Even cheating.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. He even straight line chicane to try and beat him this weekend. So he really went all out. But yeah, I think if he could have stayed in front of him, he's got a chance. But Bagnaia was just so fast. The bike was set up so well this weekend as well. Like you mentioned earlier on, he was just getting out the corner so much better than everybody else. I don't know whether that's just the way they've got that Ducati set up, whether there's upgrades that have come to the factory teams. Obviously, are not going to go to Pramac anymore because they're leaving, and not to Martin because he's leaving. So, it could be new parts. So we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. But I mean, it was when it's visually different. The acceleration, it must be some ridiculous difference. So, yeah, he was getting out the corner so well. I mean, again, it could have just been the mapping he's using on the. It could be also to do with strategy, like the way doing it throughout the race, like the factory team have calculated it better or whatever. But he was just getting such good runs out the last corner of every lap. He could just blast past if he got overtaken, which he did in both races. And obviously Martin didn't make the mistake this time, but wasn't able to keep up with him. And yeah, Bagnaia just did his typical Lorenzo kind of performance where hits the front, hits his marks, and he seems to perform the best in these races where he's got someone like a second or two behind him the whole time. He doesn't make the mistake then. So yeah, he was pretty much fine. Just hit his marks. I think I saw him make like one mistake. He ran a little bit wide for turn one on one lap. That was about it. He touched the green, but he didn't even get Cheltenham's warning over the whole race. So you can't really. He must have made at least like two mistakes on the green, I guess maximum. So that was definitely one of them right there. So he perhaps made one more mistake off camera potentially, but maybe even didn't do that. So yeah. It was again, like we said last year, you could basically just play the clip from last year here. I mean, it was a phenomenal weekend. Wasn't as dominant. I know Binder sort of stuck with him for a while in those other races, but kind of faded back to like quite a bit behind, whereas Martin pretty much stayed on him right till the end, which kind of I think shows the step that Martin made this year as well, compared to what he was doing this time last year, I guess, like clattering into people or whatever, but yeah, again, one of these circuits, Bagnaia turned up. Like he said in his interview, pretty much he turns to these tracks he knows work for him, work for his style. He has to try and get the maximum, and that's exactly what he did. And he's retaken the championship lead, bounced back from Silverstone, which was not really a good weekend for him at all. And obviously managed to take the championship lead back, do the double. Obviously, like you said, didn't quite do the pole position, but him and Martin were doing some phenomenal lap times. And I want to commend Pecco as well for, in his interviews, he was just saying, yeah, what me and Jorge are doing is like ridiculous. Like he was giving a lot of credit to Martin, to be fair. So clearly there's a bit of respect there, but in the ability, which is always nice to see between the competitors when they're like, yeah, this guy's doing a good job as well, kind of thing. I mean, I know it's also a bit like, oh, this guy's doing really well, so I'm doing even better. But it was nice to see that little bit of because he said it a couple of times, a couple of them. So it's nice to see that they clearly and they were sort of like talk about in part firm. I think they know the ridiculous pace that they're setting compared to the previous seasons.
Where can Jorge Martin go from here? Because so far this year, it looks like there's been a lot more of these Pecco weekends than there has been Martin. Where can Jorge Martin go in 2024? Because at the way it's going now, it's looking like either Ducati are holding back some data or new parts or something, because it looks like the shift definitely this weekend is definitely towards Pecco. What does he have to do to keep himself in this championship? Because it could easily turn into a bit of his landslide where Pecco starts taking 6-8 points every weekend, and then you kind of get to the flyaways and he's 30 points in his pocket and you're thinking, right, it's only a matter of time before he's a 3-time world champion. Is there anything Martin can do, or what really? What is the answer for Jorge Martin?
There's not really much more he can do, is there? I mean, obviously, like you say, potentially holding stuff back, but I don't even necessarily think it's that. It's more just the fact he's not in the factory team. So, like, you're not like if both of them get 100% out of their package a weekend, like Martin cannot win because his package potential is not as high as Bagnaia's. So there is that element to it as well. Obviously, that's not taking anything away from Bagnaia. I don't want people to think that I am by saying that. But if you look at it rawly, like on performance, if they're both getting 100% out of their performance packages, Martin should not win because his package just does not have as high a ceiling. So he has to just try everything he can every weekend. I mean, just keep doing stuff like this. Like the weekends where you can't beat Bagnaia, give him a go on the first couple of laps. You never know, he might make a mistake. It's easily done. Like someone that you don't expect gets in front of you. Perhaps you're following them into a braking zone you're not really followed. You could easily almost hit the rear or something, pick the bike up, go through the gravel. You're down to 6th, 7th place or something like that, and you've got to try and recover. And all of a sudden, a race that Martin couldn't win, he's now won it because he's got enough of a buffer kind of thing. Like, it only takes a small error, and you don't even have to, like, just by getting in front, it just fluster the other rider a little bit. You don't need to do anything aggressive, dirty to them or anything like that. It's just the fact you're even there can just put someone off a little bit. So yeah, he tried everything he could. Once he realised he couldn't do it, he tried to keep the pressure on him because, again, both of these guys crash out of leads of races. We've seen them both do it so many times. So the other one always knows they have to keep the pressure on because the potential is there for them to do it. And yeah, he's just got to try and do this. The weekends where he can't beat Bagnaia, make sure he's second, because if you're second, like you say, you've lost 7 points over a weekend. It's not a lot. And the weekends that that he's the better rider, he's got to make sure he does what Bagnaia does on the weekends. He's better and win them both. And that's all you can do. You kind of have to hope the other guy makes a mistake or that somebody else gets involved. Perhaps hope that perhaps hope on his weekends that Marc Marquez is also up there and can cause a bit of carnage or something like that, or Bastianini or whatever. Bastianini could very well be his best friend, even though he's in the other team. If Bastianini can get in front of Bagnaia, which I think he will do, I don't think he'll sit behind him, at least at this point. Probably at all, because they're also getting rid of him, so he's probably not going to ever do that. So yeah, there's not much more he can do. Just on the weekends you can't beat him, make sure you're second, give him a bit of a go like you did in the opening laps here, because he could make a mistake or whatever, or maybe his race just might go down the drain. Tyre pressure, if he can stay in front for 5 laps, his tyre pressure might go out the window as well, and he's not running the pace he should be. So he gave it a good go, basically. Or to actually answer the question, just keep as he is, because he's made some mistakes this season, but he's made a lot less than Bagnaia. Because Bagnaia won his 7th race of the season today, which is the same amount as he won last year and the year before, and some 9 rounds to go. Yet he's leading the championship by 5 points. So that tells you that actually over the season, Bagnaia may have won more races and been overall faster, but Martin's actually been more consistent, which just is ridiculous. Ridiculous thing to say.
It's pretty crazy, all right, that after coming into the main race today, that they both had 250 points each, and they were separate.
It's a nice round number, isn't it? As well, like.
Yeah, it was just nice it's just nice on the graphic, just seeing 250 each, and it was it just shows that. The question I put you there is probably a bit unfair, Martin, because I'm saying what can he do? He's doing pretty well as it is, because he's made a couple of unforced errors in main races, 3 to be exact. So yeah, he's over the limit in some places and crashes and throwing away points, but so is Pecco. So as long as he doesn't make more mistakes than Pecco does, he's probably doing just about enough to kind of keep himself in the rear view mirror. Pecco, of course, it's only 5 points to lead now for Pecco, and of course
nothing, is it?
That's nothing really. That can go anytime really. That could be one of those things where a bad qualifying could kind of level that out really. Like, it's one of those things where it's easily to kind of get rid of that. It doesn't take much to kind of lose or gain 5 points back on your opponent. So really, he just needs to kind of, I suppose you are right, he just needs to keep going, tipping away, keeping these points on.
Pick the right tyre at Phillip Island, maybe he's one, and don't crash at Mandalika.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Make some of the silly mistakes that he's made that last year, he hasn't made this year, it's definitely have helped. Yeah. So, again, it does look like that as well. It's the last part of the calendar, Pecco does seem to misfire more. Both title charges when he beat Fabio and Jorge Martin. He didn't have amazing ends to the season in all the flyaway races. He did have a mistake in him. So again, if you're Jorge Martin, you kind of need to look at that as something you need to be able to keep yourself kind of in the hunt. So just when you get to Phillip Island, a Sepang, where Pecco might kind of stutter, or Motegi, remember when he crashed under very little pressure in that race that day. So he does.
That was about as bad as the Iagora one, that.
Yeah, that was probably worse, because it was Iagora. Iagora's trying to win a race. I don't know what Pecco's trying.
He was trying to pass Fabio, but he could have just waited till the straight.
Yeah, it's such a silly thing to do. But yeah, I think Jorge Martin just needs to keep going as he is and not give away needless points and crashes. He's already crashed 3 times in the main races. I know Pecco's had a couple of DNFs too, but you just feel like that Pecco now is getting into a bit of stride. He has to make sure he keeps the pressure on and somehow maybe force an opening for himself in the last third of the season. Now, one team that looks to be making a bit of a comeback, well, this round at least, and it's kind of tire-related, is KTM, especially Binder. He was much more on this weekend. Jack had a good sprint, having a good main race until he crashed, wherever I said that before. Yeah, KTM, have they found something, or am I just looking into the fact that this tyre we had this weekend was working better?
They're about the same, though, really, in terms of results. In fact, they were worse, if anything. Because...
Really?
Yeah.
What'd you say?
Where was Binder? 5th?
5th, 4th,
Yeah,
5th, 4th, 5th?
Yeah, it was 5th, wasn't he? So, he's finished around there. Acosta finished 5th last week. So, it's not... I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I suppose, but they were actually... They seemingly...
Miller was probably better, but
a lot more.
That was...
Yeah.
But Acosta was worse, so... there were still only 2 of them doing anything, and the other 2 are battling for 16th at the back, so... Yeah, I don't know. I don't really think they were any better. I think they were actually quite disappointing considering that this track, they're usually a lot closer. They test so much here. They have been testing here. The bike is built for this circuit. Their straight line speed is pretty good. But they, put it this way, Binder finished like a few seconds off the back of the GP23 last year and did the same this year. So the bike has effectively gone nowhere if you look at it like that.
Interesting. Yeah, I see it. They're 18 seconds off of
18 seconds
the
off
GP24 as well.
Yeah, 18 seconds off the GP24, probably like, getting on for maybe like almost 5 seconds off the back of Marquez. Marquez came for 13th.
Yeah, and Marquez went off.
Yeah, which I know Marquez, is Marquez, so there is that to it, but it's like the current KTM versus last year's, not even the end of season Ducati. So if you look at it like that, he was actually closer. It was basically the same. They basically haven't made a step at all. I mean, the tyre definitely did seem to be working better for them in general, but the result was pretty much the same for Binder as it was previously. I mean, he didn't seem to maybe be as on edge and crash as much, and he was the only guy that got directly through to Q2, so yeah, maybe his overall weekend was better, but his result was still virtually the same. I guess the difference is that Acosta wasn't in front of him, but that was more that Acosta had a terrible weekend than Binder had a good one, in my opinion.
Yeah, I suppose, when you kind of break it down, I tend to see that too. I just felt that the fact that both factory KTMs were up there in the main race and they both looked better this weekend, Jack getting into Q2 as well via Q1, I just felt like that they were slightly closer, and as well Paul looking quite fast as well in the one lap speed. But I suppose when you kind of break it down, they probably were 1 step forward, half step back kind of thing, so it's kind of muddy waters for them whether they're actually gaining anything or not. And the fact that their bike this year that was meant to be a big step is still being beaten by GP23 is I suppose that is worrying if you're in the KTM factory. But they're probably one of the factories I have faith in the most between them and Ducati. I feel still don't maybe have the funding that I think they'll need to take on a full tilt at the title. The 2 Japanese ones are making small steps, but it's like Honda's slightly better this weekend, but again, it's slight to the point where you could even argue that it hasn't been any better. So
Yamaha was burning people, I think, this weekend.
Burning people.
I think Fabio's leg was burning a bit. I could have misheard that, but I'm pretty sure they said that. And then he also got a long lap in the race for track limits, which is not really like him. So
that just probably shows the extreme lengths he's going. Probably on corner entry, that he's running wide on corner exit and out onto the green, I'd imagine, because obviously he's very good on the brakes and very good on one lap side, I'd imagine. And he was so close to getting into Q2, but I think even if this track he makes Q2, he still doesn't have a good result, because I just think that...
Well, they were going quicker in the race than he did in qualifying, so... the sprint anyway. The sprint race they're doing 28s, and he didn't do a single 28 all weekend. So his time attack pace is slower than their sprint race pace.
That must be a savage worry for everyone at Yamaha, not just Fabio. And in fact, as well, the Hondas, because the Honda was slightly closer at the start of the weekend, but again, it looks like when everyone else kind of gets into gear, they just don't find anything else. Similar to Yamaha, where if we went racing at 1 o'clock on a Friday, Yamaha and Honda probably wouldn't be as far off as they usually are, but by the time everyone crunches numbers and kind of gets going, it just looks like that they're further away again, as it always seems that, like, as the week goes on, they go further back. But Rhys, we have Aragon next. Any bold predictions for our 76th Spanish race of the season?
Oh, I don't know. I think I was going to say that the race is going to be in Spain, so that's taken away from me.
Yeah.
No, predictions. It's tricky to say because I've already said that I don't think Marquez is going to win, so I can't say that.
That's kind of why I threw the question at you, because I want to see what other surprises could there be.
Maybe that's my prediction that he's not going to win now. Tell you what, my prediction is that Bastianini will win, and
well, you just took my prediction.
Wow,
so,
there you go. I've absolutely ruined you there.
I'll have to,
because there's a new surface there, so it will be a bit more crispy. I tell you what, then, my prediction is that it'll be a Yamaha 1-2.
It'll be a Yamaha 21-22.
Yeah, potentially.
That's more like
it might be a Yamaha 1-2, and actually no, definitely won't, because this is like the worst track for the Yamaha, and Fabio hates this track as well. So
yeah,
probably the worst circuit to pick.
About this track.
Yeah, he was probably happy to see the backside of it last year. Not very happy to see it's back this year. No, yeah, that's my prediction. Bastianini will win, and I think maybe either one of Martin or Bagnaia will not be on the podium.
That's quite a prediction.
I had to throw something in there.
I think we should end the podcast on that, because then it'll keep it fresh in the viewers' minds and the listeners' minds too.
Well, if I'm right, absolute masterstroke.
Absolute masterstroke, but that's quite a prediction.
Yeah,
I see the Bastianini link. Pecco, I could see Marquez into two factory dudes. I could see Jorge Martin. Yeah, I could see Jorge Martin having a bit of a struggle weekend up against, because I know both Pecco and Bastianini go well. Then of course Marquez will probably force a result out, maybe not a win, but I think he'll force something out.
He could force one of them off the podium. You never know. I mean, it's Marquez.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that is where we should end this podcast. Thank you all for tuning in. If you are listening on YouTube, drop the video a like. If you are on Spotify, we are very rapidly approaching 1,000 followers, so if you do want to hit that follow button for more updates when the podcast goes live, it should be underneath the podcast. And again, you can leave us a rating and a comment on the Spotify podcast as well. So yeah, thank you all for listening. Hope you have enjoyed. We'll be back in 2 weeks for Aragon. Thanks for all. Bye-bye.